Making and Managing Success for Esports brand panel. I'm Annie. I'm the marketing and project admin at Access Replay. Access Replay is a 12,000 square foot esports and video game venue in downtown Atlanta on Krog Street. We exist to create fun, social experiences for gamers and their friends so they can build stronger connections.
And it's super cool. So if you haven't been there, definitely go down and check it out. Right off the Beltline, lovely real estate. I'm Kat with Skillshot Media. We are a subsidiary of hi-rez Studios, the game developer that is up the road in Alpharetta. So some of what we do is work directly with these pro teams, different leagues from minor league all the way up to the best of the best to facilitate competitions. But we also work with games from other publishers too. So we have been fortunate to work with Halo, Supercell, and the Overwatch League Atlanta team. Right?
And I am Lucas. I'm the esports program coordinator for GSU, which is a university. But the varsity program obviously holds varsity teams for competition in a number of games, as well as providing events for students and for other people who just want to come in and compete or otherwise watch esports.
Cool. So what is the brand vision for Skillshot in GSU?
Okay.
So Skillshot, we are definitely about community-driven esports, right? So these games that are produced have thriving communities, people who are passionate, that keep coming back to engage with it. So what we do is we take it to the next level and introduce esports into the equation. On one hand, from the standpoint of traditional sports, you're getting a lot of the similar kind of benefits, whether it's discipline, being able to go out and practice, camaraderie, teamwork. So a lot of similarities there. And then it's just another way to engage your community. So whereas say you go to an NBA game and Steph Curry is your favorite person, right? You can have the posters, you can be like, oh, you're my favorite, but is he going to be like, you are my favorite player today? Probably not, So when it comes to esports and the way that we do things around community, you're having these pro players dropping into chat, talking to you, whether it's on stream, creating content that satisfy the itch for more information, for meaningful engagement. So above anything else, Skillshot, one, we're selfishly very focused on the Southeast, elevating esports and gaming here. But we're also very focused on building and continuing to help other publishers build these very strong, hyper-engaged communities around their IPs.
As for GSU, obviously a strong priority is always going to be competition in collegiate esports. We want to form strong teams, and we want to build a brand which says that we are competitively successful. But I think even more than that, the goal of the GSU esports program and the image we want to project is about a program which successfully engages students both in competition as well as in skills and ultimately in the industry which is emerging around this, right? Obviously, it's growing incredibly rapidly, and particularly in Georgia, there are a number of companies that are always looking for people familiar with the esports scene and familiar with the skills necessary to succeed in things like esports event production. And so being able to prepare students for that is a huge deal for us.
Okay, coming up.
Yep, November.
So as you're developing the brand, it's an ongoing process, right? So for Skillshot, you guys may have to juggle between game development kind of voice versus like pro teams and other brands. How do you juggle with that kind of?
That's a great question. So each game has its own kind of vibe, its own community, its own language. So it's learning that. So you're not saying anything off brand. It's terrible. But then each kind of pro team, they have their own kind of way that they do things. So let's say Space Station Gaming. They are so meme heavy, it's lovely. Like, they come out with some of the best, tongue-in-cheek kind of content, that I've seen. But then you have other teams that are a lot more kind of modest in the way they approach things. So a lot of it is, figuring out, what is the brand voice? What is it that they identify with? And then finding a way to translate that into the messaging that we create around it, the broadcast graphics that we create, whatever kind of promotional material, even down to what words our casters are using to describe either the game or individuals in the game. and which casters would not be a great fit because they're either too snarky or they're too nice, kind of doing that research. So it's an ongoing process. It definitely keeps us on our toes, but from whether you're managing your own brand or an esports brand, doing the research and figuring out what they like, what their approach is, or if they don't have a brand voice, asking them, well, what do you want to sound like? Do you want to be a helpful golden retriever, or do you want to be a voracious pitbull? Like, where are we at on the spectrum? Those kind of questions can really help kind of hone in like the way that you go about communication and whatnot.
You repeat the question.
So for GSU, you guys have to work within like the GSU like brand guidelines and marketing stuff. How do you approach that?
Okay, that's definitely been a challenge, and it's sort of been a pave your own path kind of thing. Because one of the most common issues we've found is that certainly university system has gotten much better about their adoption of like social media in promotion of the overall GSU brand. But many of the things and many of the channels that we've been looking to promote GSU esports in hadn't really been done for the university before we did them. So like when we were first starting up, one of the big challenges was figuring out what branded promotional guidelines are for a Twitch channel, because there was no GSU Twitch channel before we started one. And it's similar in some respects to like broadcast media that they've done, but also engagement with viewers isn't really a thing in traditional broadcast media. And so it was that was probably the most prominent challenge, is working out what exactly are our guidelines, what can we do, what can't we do, because it was simply a challenge that no one in the university like PR and marketing department had dealt with before.
Okay, so you guys also have a student organization called Panther Gaming.
Yeah.
How do you juggle marketing and branding with that student organization that you have less control over?
Mostly we don't. So as a student organization, they're entirely independent. They do their own marketing. They try and brand themselves however they want, and we're not really involved with that. Most of the marketing we do that involves them is, so we cross-promote a lot of stuff, obviously, for our events, because we have basically the same core audience. And having rather a larger budget than they do, we can put on somewhat bigger events, so we always try and get them to come out. But really, the only thing I would say we do that actually involves them is just in distinguishing between Georgia State, esports and Panther Gaming is mostly in the games we play. It's not really in like how we try and market one another. So if someone comes to us and says, I want to play Rocket League, I just direct them to Panther Gaming. That's not like there's no huge distinction that needs to be made there.
Okay. Do you think that there's a difference between marketing towards a collegiate audience versus a global audience, or just even a southeastern region audience?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because collegiate, even though it's you have pioneers like GSU, like KSU, really building the space, there's still a lot of education that needs to happen. Whether it's from, the coaching perspective, be it from how as an avid player of, Smite, how do I progress, to the next level. So a lot of the work that we do is, consulting about arena build-outs, or, hey, I want to start an esports team, where do we go? How much is it going to cost? And stuff like that, But on the global audience, Smite and Paladins in particular, I'd say for Paladins, about 50% of our player base is in Brazil, So how do we market there? And each different countries have their own customs, cultures, do's, don'ts, So something that might fly in the United States may not somewhere else, So being cognizant of those, cultural differences and respectful, especially in games, it's different if we were doing like a Halo, which is an older audience. But for Smite and Paladins, it's very much 13 and up, so family-friendly, non-toxic environment, so being cognizant of that as well. So it's a challenge, but it's really cool, because at the end of the day, like once you strip everything away, everybody's passionate about these games. They just want to engage to the next level, so this is the best way that we can meet that need.
Yeah, and so unlike the global audience, the market for the GSU esports brand is very narrowly defined. It's basically existing students and then to a lesser extent prospective students, right? Which has advantages and disadvantages. It means that we can't necessarily cast as wide a net as a global company might have. And more importantly, it means that while we have easy access to communication with that market, at the same time, every other organization, group, and team on campus has basically that exact same access. So a lot of it is about just making sure that students have the opportunity to become aware that the program exists, aware of what events the program hosts, and then making sure those messages aren't drowned out in the 105 messages that every freshman gets every day from everyone on campus who wants to talk to them. So it's definitely in some ways easier to access the market, but there's definitely challenges in like getting specific information to people who might be interested in it.
What challenges have you guys faced when developing and maintaining this brand?
I would say probably twofold. So one is the level of research that goes into onboarding a new game. You know, we've been working with hi-rez properties for the past 6 years, so it's like we get that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're talking about a Supercell, you know, or Overwatch League, which is like so much cock, you know, you know, so it's like, okay, we're playing the games, we're getting in there to see like how do we set up the spectator cameras to make sure that we're following the action appropriately. What do their broadcast assets look like? Are they very rigid? They are very rigid. Or are they kind of flexible? Are they trying to figure out like what they're trying to do? So I'd say from the time, even before we agreed to help facilitate a tournament for a different publisher, there's about 3 to 4 weeks worth of research that goes on internally just to make sure that we're capable of delivering to the best of our ability. It's a fun process. It's been a very thorough process. It's a lot more than just having somebody like, oh yeah, I love Halo, I can do this. No, it's a lot. So that'd probably be one of it. And then the other one would definitely be like locking down, like once we do that infrastructure research, now it's down to the fine-tuned detail research. So, you know, what do they call it? Is it mid-lane, solo lane? Like, what is the terminology that these games use? What does the fan base use to, you know, describe the game or different things that happen in it? You know, what's the age range look like? You know, who are we marketing towards? So then all of that kind of detailed, brand-specific work has been done. So, long answer to your short question. It would probably be the research and development and bringing on new IPs.
For GSU, I think there are 2 main ones. The first one is one I already talked about in terms of the difficulty of incorporating sort of new channels and new media into existing brand guidelines, which you have to do basically at the same time as you're doing your actual marketing, because you want to host the events and you don't want to spend a year just working out what you're going to say before you actually say it. And then the second one is, obviously one of the most important things is maintaining consistency of messaging so that you're putting out, you know, correct information, you're getting it to people who need it in order to become engaged, and you're doing it on a regular basis. But what sort of makes that, I think, uniquely difficult in a university environment is the fact that, A, our audience is kind of transitory. Like, ideally, within 4 or 5 years, they will leave and will have the exact same set of problems over again. But also, a lot of the people that we use for things like event production, as well as just like the actual running of the program and the teams, they're transitory as well. They're students, which means that every couple of years, we're basically retraining the entire staff, except for like me and a couple of others, of the varsity program. And so unlike with like a company where you might have, you know, there's a learning curve certainly, but people mostly stay there and gain that knowledge. With us, we're having to constantly redo everything we've already done. And so doing that while maintaining a consistent like schedule of events and a consistent messaging scheme for your brand is definitely challenging.
Makes sense. So you spoke about transitory, which is very relatable. So there's a lot of trends that happen in esports marketing and branding, and they can shift very quickly. How do you guys keep up with these trends, if you do keep up with these trends? And what happens if the trends don't align with your brand voice?
That is also a good question. So a lot of it's just kind of like, hold on to your saddle and let's ride this out. You know, kind of figuring, because it's changing by the minute. You know, by the time we leave this room, there's probably going to be some big announcement that we've all missed because you're sitting here listening to us. But one is just, you know, having a couple of good resources that you go to, you know, regularly, just to catch up. You know, so some of mine are the Daily Walkthrough, which is gaming-related newsletter, the Atlanta Business Chronicle, you know, just to see how different players in the non-endemic space are navigating or trying to get into this space. What is it? Weekly.gg, I think it's what. Don't quote me on that. haven't figured it out. You know, and then of course subscribing to newsletters from different colleges, organizations like GSU, where they get everything that comes through. It's like, okay, that's what you're doing over there, great. You know, and seeing like how it all kind of fits together. So being informed and staying informed is definitely half the battle. You know, especially when there's so much, you know, changing, new announcements and whatnot. But it's exciting because everybody that's in kind of esports has a voice at the table to shape it. You know, at the collegiate level, at the pro level, at the amateur level, there's infinite amount of space. So just to put in perspective, like gaming is $145 billion right now, and esports is only 1% of that. You know, so you have 99%, like all that, you know, just, you know, to play with, catch up with, establish and shape, you know. So part of it is keeping up with what everybody else in the space is doing at all of these different levels. But then, you know, what do you want to bring to the table? You know, what do you want to do and provide, whether it's for your viewers, your students, you know, or just people who are curious about the industry.
So collegiate esports branding is in sort of a weird place right now where no one's totally sure what model works yet. What most colleges seem to be going for is something along the lines of the traditional athletics model, where the idea is to build investment in the team and in their competitive successes, and use that to establish like a strong, you know, interest in it with the current student population as well as a population of invested alumni. Time will tell whether or not that pays out. Obviously, it's worked very well in traditional athletics. If you look at, you know, the investment in college football, college basketball. But at the same time, by joining that model, that puts esports in direct competition with things like football and basketball. Obviously, usually not the same people are interested in those kinds of things, but I think it's important to remember that there are a bunch of other college sports which don't really have the same following. And so that's and more importantly, that's a model that'll take 10 to 15 years to determine whether or not it's really going to pay off for the college or university. So as far as GSU goes, we don't really try to follow that trend. In particular for us, like I mentioned earlier, what's more important is the educational opportunities that esports provides for students in terms of access to the industry, in terms of skills development. Like unlike most esports programs, we're actually hosted in an academic department. And so for us, we're sort of consciously bucking that trend as far as branding goes. Both because we think that's what's best for our students, but also because it kind of sets us apart. Where every other college and university is talking, you know, trying to persuade you to come play for their program on the basis of competitive success. If we can offer something different, then we will have access to an entirely different market of prospective students. Okay.
So for Skillshot, when you have your casters like talking on stream, what if they say something that doesn't align with your brand vision? What do you do?
So we never, you know, get the old hook and yank them off the stage. We don't do that. A lot of it is coaching. So if there is some kind of slip up or outrage from the community over what was said or how it was handled. Case in point, there was one of our pro teams, they were about 2.5 hours late to their scheduled competition. You know, so on one hand it's like, okay, you're just late, you know, big deal, but, you know, running these actual broadcasts and production, we're paying staff to be there, you know, to do all this stuff that they're waiting, you know, the community, they're like, this is supposed to start 2.5 hours ago, what's going on? I'm tired of hearing you fill, you know, with updates about hi-rez expo, go check it out. Like, there's only so many times you can say that. And one of our casters was very upset, you know, so when he went to interview the team that showed up late, you know, it was a little kind of heavy-handed. Some people thought it was unnecessarily so, you know, but you're kind of dealing with opinions, right? You know, so what one person may feel may not be universal. So it's just having a conversation. It's like, we understand why, but we could do better with the execution. As much free training as possible usually helps. You know, so a new caster that we bring on board is training off screen for at least 6 weeks, you know, before they even begin to see, you know, a camera in their face going live. But from a publisher, so if we're working with a third-party publisher and they make a Smite reference in a League of Legends game, like, come on. You know, not that this has happened, but just to set an example. That's definitely a bigger issue, you know, because we're supposed to be the experts behind the scenes, making sure that this is a cohesive experience across the board. You know, so when there are slip-ups like that, should they happen, then that would be a lot more, need more course correction, you know, than somebody cursing on the street or something like that.
So then for GSU, your professional players are essentially representing sort of state, your brand as well. How do you like manage if they slip up?
Well, we've definitely had some issues with that in the past, and it's like I said, with everything else, it's an ongoing issue. So we define a pretty clear code of conduct that we have all incoming players sign as regards our expectations for their conduct, what does and does not count as like good sportsmanship. We also go over the rules for the major competition in their game. So like if they're playing Smite, then we go over what is outlined in the rules for competition for like the NA Smite League. Same for League of Legends and College League of Legends. And most of it's just like that constant reinforcement of like what are norms in casual or even like ranked games are not necessarily the norm in the competitive scene, and just making sure that they're aware of it. Obviously slip-ups are going to happen. It happens in normal athletics. It's like kind of expected. We just do what we can to try and minimize that and ensure that our players understand that they are representing the university and to try and avoid it whenever possible.
Okay, but then a lot of times gaming can be seen as like feeling more authentic because it's unfiltered sometimes. So then how do you juggle that kind of perspective that people have?
Let it show in your play. Like I understand that idea. I don't think it's true. I don't think it's really ever been true when it comes to like actual communication with another team or communication with the press or really with any outside source, right? Like I have no problem with players being unfiltered in how they play or in their opinions, but they need to understand that what they mean and what they intend is not always the way something will be taken by their audience, and they never know who's going to be watching.
We have a saying that if it feels good, don't tweet it. Just let it sit there for a little bit. Think about it. Get somebody else to read it. Then figure out if you want to tweet it or not. But yeah, like authenticity is very important. You know, and we never want to be like censoring the players or whoever casters, because that personality is what engages people. You know, you might like a caster that I can't stand and vice versa. But even down to the players, like we have competitive rulings that go out. You know, if there's toxic conduct, unprofessional, and they'll get fined. They can get ejected from the league. So we take it very seriously. It's sportsmanship and being a good representative for what you're a part of. Like even though you're the kind of bread and butter, the team that's going out there competing that has a fan base, you're still a brand representative. So you can't go around cursing out grandmothers, in a 13 and up game. Like that's just not what we do over here. So just kind of having it's a two-way street. So making sure that the people representing the organization are also being adhering to your brand standards.
Because there's so many different opinions and like tastes, I guess, in gaming and esports, how do you juggle having such a wide variety of like audience?
I think just putting out good content, from a broadcast perspective, being willing to experiment. So we have, just like any traditional TV news station, trying to figure out new shows. Everybody will get into a room and be like, well, the community's been asking about, like, I want to see some more, content from our support players. Like, why can't we just learn about what they do and how that works? Because I'm a support player and I want to be the very best support player, like no one ever was, so we're like, okay, well, let's try it, So we put together a show called Role Q, and we go through the different roles that are within Smite and Paladins. And we just have all the support players at the table, and they're talking about, like, oh, this is what I do. So being willing to experiment, to change, if it's not working, not trying to force the issue just because we love it, we thought it was a great idea, but being receptive to feedback is probably the number one thing that we do. And then if it doesn't work, just let it go. And if it does work, even if we don't think it's a thing, then that's fine too. And the funniest example, and this is a total sidebar, on the program, that chicken up in the corner for Realm Royale. So it's a battle royale game, right? and they wanted to get away. They didn't want to keep the chicken in it. So if you get eliminated in the game, you turn into a chicken. You make a lot of noise when you squawk, you know. And if somebody takes you out, then you're done. But if you can like chill and not squawk for like 5 seconds or so, then you respawn. You can continue playing again. They didn't want to keep the chicken, and I'm like, that's the best part. The community was like, oh, we love the chicken. Like, well, we don't want to be that chicken battle royale game, you know. But it's like, we listen to the community, and that's one of the things that kind of set it apart, you know. So it's like, even if people know, it's like, oh, it's that chicken battle royale game. Now we have like donuts and a whole bunch of other stuff in it too. Like, it's gotten way off the rails. We've got Draco chicken, you know, for Halloween, like, you know. But listening and taking it and not being offended, being willing to play, it definitely makes a world of difference.
So for us, our market is actually like fairly straightforward, and then it's university students, right? So we don't necessarily need to appeal to all students. But what is most important as far as diversity of content for us goes is more about the content about the games that we offer, because there are a huge number of different, you know, gaming subgroups and gaming interest groups at GSU, and we want to try to be able to provide content that interests and engages all of them, right? So at our upcoming Pantoland event, we're going to offer straight up competition in 8 different games, as well as a BYOC area, as well as free play, and a bunch of other different style games. And so, like, we've been making, especially recently, a concerted effort. Most of our varsity teams are in MOBAs, first-person shooters, and we recently added Hearthstone. But we've also been trying to reach out and engage the fighting game community, as well as like the sport game community with FIFA and Madden. So a lot of it's just being able to reach the little sub-communities that build around games and grant them access to the larger GSU space.
Cool. So you talked about feedback and receiving feedback as a big part of like what you guys decide to put out and like how you do things. So what are good ways to receive feedback?
I mean, you probably get too much feedback because there's so many ways to get in touch nowadays. It's not writing a letter anymore. It's, I'm going to DM you on Twitter, and I'm going to send you something on Instagram, and then your email too, and then the group email, and I might just show up at your door. You know. So some of the main ways that we collect feedback is chat. You know, so we have community managers, and they do a whole bunch of other brilliant things. But one of the things that they do a lot is hang out and chat during tournaments, during dev patch updates, you know, anything. Just in talking to the community, getting their feedback, asking questions. We might run a poll. Be like, how do you feel about, you know, this new river goddess Umoja we just released? Oh my gosh, she's amazing! You know, like, you know, or I really don't like her, you know. So, and of course, it's all a grain of salt, you know, because there's some feedback that is on target from one person or from a group of people as validity to it, or you just have somebody that's like, yeah, no, we're not going to bring Deadpool into my song. That's just cool in theory, but that's no. Yes. You know, so chat would probably be our main channel that we do that through. We also have like kind of forums and polls at hi-rez Expo. We do have a lot of people there collecting the feels from the community because that's where a lot of people actually fly in to participate in the World Championship event. But between community managers, QA, there's a whole bunch of different ways. Like if there's a Discord, is another big one. There's one channel for every studio that we have, and that's usually the top 3 places that we go to collect feedback.
What about
So for us, especially with the smaller market, Discord is probably our main channel for feedback, mostly just because that's how most people get in touch with me. They'll just send me a DM and say, hey, why aren't you doing this? So we get a decent amount of feedback. The community is still small enough that we can do a lot of like one-on-one engagement and directly respond to individuals' concerns. A lot of what that is, I've learned that university students have a lot of really great ideas which they want to do immediately. And so a lot of my responding to feedback has been explaining, okay, I understand why you want to do this like 500-person tournament in 2 weeks' time. Let me explain why that's not going to happen, but I appreciate the idea.
What do you mean?
Or, hey, can you add this, you know, varsity team next week because I want to compete? It's like, no, we'll look at it next year. And so it's definitely not as much mass market stuff, but a lot of it is just like students deciding to send me stuff through email and Discord are probably the most common, or just walking up to me when I'm on campus. Most of the time, unless I'm getting a lot of people asking about the same things, it doesn't usually create like a strong incentive to change. But if a bunch of people are complaining about the same thing, then obviously it's going to be reviewed and looked at. But often you just get people complaining about weird stuff that, like, they and they alone want. And, like, good idea, get some more people together, and then we'll talk.
Makes sense.
A lot of it is managing expectations.
Yeah.
Well, what are some ways that you guys have found like helpful to manage these expectations?
You gotta communicate. You know, so if your player base or your fans, you know, they're upset about something, you know, you can listen to it and you can say that you're working on it. But if you communicate like, okay, hey, this is what we've heard, this is kind of our process, bear with us, you know, being over communicative versus like secretive or ashamed or whatever works very well. And then just being real. Like, hey, you know, I know that, you know, the game is unstable right now, you know, we're working through it, you know, but have you built a game? You know, it's not as simple as like poof and there was Smite. You know, it's like, so just kind of being like, yeah, we understand, but this is the process that we have to go through. You know, we appreciate your patience. You know, have a code, chill out. Or probably the best. If anything else, like, communicate, you know, and if you messed up, say you messed up, you know, just own it, deal with the backlash, you know, and try and move forward, because when you start keeping secrets or you don't communicate, that's when, you know, you really start to run into issues that don't end very well.
Yeah. Yeah, for us, explaining our decision-making process has always been huge. So like I was saying earlier, a lot of students have really great ideas, but they've never had the opportunity to actually try and implement them. So there's an assumption that it must be easier, or that you can just like do the thing, as opposed to, you know, the processes and the university bureaucracy that needs to go. So often I find just explaining, okay, laying out step by step, in order to get that done, here's what we need to do as far as budgetary concerns, as far as getting the space, as far as organizing and marketing the event, and then once you lay it all out and explain like the reason for that decision or the reason for a time frame, people tend to get it. Like, that makes sense. And like that's honestly, yeah, a lot of what it is, just explain why you're doing the things that you're doing.
And not kind of like in a butt hole, you know, just meet them where they're at. You know, they'll be like, well, I am so and so, and this is what, you know, like. And I think that that's the thing in that communication when you are explaining, like, really take the time to explain, you know, and answer their questions. Don't try and do like a box cookie cutter kind of answer. Because they'll snip out like, you probably said this to everyone. Did your PR department write this? Yes, actually I did. But but I'm going to customize it so you know that I'm listening to what you're saying, you know, and facilitate that. So.
Okay. I guess my last question before I open up the floor to any questions is deciding on what games to like either host tournaments or like broadcast for, or just to like have a team for. How do you decide?
I don't know. We love them all, honestly. I don't think we really have. It's more like, okay, well, is your game in a place where we can facilitate tournaments this person? Because not every game is esports ready, you know, and trying to push the envelope without having the foundation, it's not going to end well, you know. So, like, competitive solitaire, how thrilling is that? But conversely, you also see like different like indie games, right? So like Blue Mammoth, you know, even though they're a Ubisoft studio, bless. But Stardew Valley, they just had an esports competition like a couple months ago. You know, and then like, what? How's the farming sim and esports? I don't even think it was amazing. I'm totally biased. I love Stardew Valley so much, too many hours. But you know, different like did you catch all the legendary fish? How much money did your crops bring in? And it was like 6 hours, and it was multiplayer, so you had different teams around the world. You know, so one, is your game esports ready? If not, then are there things that are you gonna add in later? So that Stardew Valley tournament wouldn't have worked without multiplayer mode. It just wouldn't have been the same experience. And then just having a conversation, like, what are you trying to achieve? Is it brand awareness? You know, is it you want to have a $30 million Fortnite World Championship event? Is that Black Hole still on the thing? Did you see that? The Fortnite? I did. So they did something.
Still up and going.
That makes me so mad. Side note, yeah, so Fortnite, they just ended their season, and now there's like literally a black hole like on their stream, and the world is freaking out, trying to figure out what is happening. Oh, is it still on there? Like, do they do any kind of announcements?
No,
It's crazy, because I'm on the edge of my seat asking about it in the panel. Anyway, so, but yes, I forgot.
Yeah. So for us, we have sort of two different processes depending on whether it's a game that we want to form a team for or games we just want to host a competition for. For teams, there are two primary questions. So first of all, is there like interest for this among our students? There's not much point in trying to form a team if we can't find people to form the team from. And then is there competition for this? We can form the team all we want, but if they can't compete anywhere because no like organizations are hosting events for it or hosting competition for it, well then they're just going to sit there and that's kind of pointless. For events and for competition, it's more about who can we engage by hosting this, right? So like right now at Pantherland, we've got League of Legends and we've got Smite, so we're probably not going to add another MOBA there because we've already got two that covers a broad base of the mobile market. But we can engage a lot more people if we added, say, Madden, because that brings in the sports game market, that brings people who might not otherwise have engaged with the event.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I lied. I have one more question. What are some of the new initiatives that you're excited about?
Ooh. I was honestly I would just say esports in general, because because there's just like so much room for growth and like partnerships, and you see different organizations, universities, non-endemic companies getting involved in this space. So a lot of it is learning and discovery. If you meet somebody that says, I know everything there is to know about esports, they're lying to you. Run in the opposite direction as quickly as you can. So there's just a lot of room for collaboration, for partnerships, for groundbreaking, and campaigns and initiatives. And from the Skillshop perspective, we're excited to help game publishers elevate their brand and their community, but then as a company, elevating esports in the Southeast. Like, we want, forget California school, forget New York, Chicago, whatever. Like, we want people to think esports and think we're just because it's a perfect hotbed for student, talent, like a pipeline there. You have all these awesome game developers that are here. You have indie people doing things like on the daily. You have GTA, there's just, it's, all the ingredients are there. It's just how much of it we're going to throw into a pot and how long we're going to cook it before we get down to the chow.
So for us, probably the next big thing is what we're going to do with our Spring Pantherland event. So we've done 3 Pantherlands now and have a pretty strong idea of how to run them. So obviously we're changing everything. We're adding more days of competition. We're trying to make it like a Southeastern Invitational thing. So we're inviting a number of NACE member schools. We're partnering with NACE to run some workshops and basically a mini conference alongside it, adding some more games to competition. Basically just trying to make it bigger and better in every way. Should be a lot of fun.
Cool. Do you guys have any last words before we open up the photo session?
If you haven't gone to Pantherland, definitely check it out.
It's November 9th at the GSU Stadium.
Ooh, yeah.
So how would you, a lot of fighting games in each community, how would you implement that
So we actually, for MomoCon, we did the Skillshop Atlanta Open, which is we took like a mini kind of tournament setup to MomoCon, DragonCon, and the Weekend Atlanta. So MomoCon was Soul Calibur. That's awesome. It was like, it's been a minute. I was like, I forgot Soul Calibur was a thing. It was like, so that was kind of our first interaction with the fighting game community. We already knew that there was a huge FGC presence here just from final round, which is in March, I think March. So that's really big, and then there's so much passion there. And if we talk about the business model for a minute, so if we take something like Smite or Fortnite, where you have like a regular update schedule, so there's always kind of new content coming in, players engaged or bringing new players because that skin's pretty, it's retro Barbie or whatever, I totally want to use that, so there's that. But for fighting games, what they come out one point of the year and you pay your $60, you might get, a patch here or there to fix something that's buggy, but you have to wait until the next iteration to get the next fighting game. Oh, like what? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Generally, the game comes out, first DLC, patch, second DLC, patch. It's like the fighting games normally the norm for support is about a year, but there are some exceptions. Several Showdown, Street Fighter 5, Mortal Kombat just came out. So it definitely there are some exceptions.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't mean to make a grand sweeping generalization by any means.
No,
But appreciate that. But and maybe this is my bias, we update Smite maybe every like 3 weeks, so that cadence compared to what you see in other games, it feels Ice Age slow. But with good cause, right? Because it's a different experience. But the Atlanta fighting game community is massive, and there just isn't a lot of opportunity currently for them outside of their own community tournaments. There's 404 esports up in Doraville. I know Axis, you guys do a lot with it too. So trying to figure out how to engage, this community, it's both exciting and challenging because it's working with the game kind of update model that we're not very familiar with. So learning curve. MomoCon was great because we actually brought on key people in the FGC, from FGC to cast for us. So we had one of our casters, and he was learning from 6 other casters or personality influencers about, like, this is how you call this play, this is what you do, so it was a learning experience for us just as much as we were providing the service for them. So I would love to see that come back. I love Mortal Kombat. Not sure we would pick that up for obvious reasons, but there's definitely a huge community for that here.
As far as teams go, integrating the FGC is definitely something we've been trying to do. Sort of the big difficulty for us is just budgetary. Unlike all of the other games we participate in, most FGC tournaments require travel, which we would like to be able to do it. It's just an expense above and beyond what the rest of our teams cost us, so it's purely a budgetary question. As far as events go, we absolutely are trying to integrate the FGC. We're offering Tekken at Pantherland, and we'll have a fairly large student-run Smash tournament. The Smash community in GSU in particular is very large. The part of the issue there is that it's sort of the norm in fighting game tournaments to offer a cash prize funded by basically a door fee. The problem for us is that for basically a number of legal reasons, we can't do that. And so our challenge has mostly been trying to find ways to integrate the FGC while still providing a reason for them to come and compete.
So what is the best way to use people after data, anyone who wants to get involved, then you can send out the
Well, we just answered to the player one most definitely, because for us it changes so much. But as far as casters, first, how much do you love the game? That you're about to broadcast for. Because if you want to cast Super Smash Brothers, but you hate Super Smash Brothers, which doesn't make any sense. Even saying it feels weird. Who doesn't love that game? You're probably not going to do a good job casting Super Smash Brothers. So, finding out, okay, what do you get passionate about? And then actually playing the game so that you understand, the different terminologies. Watching other people play the game that are better than you. To understand, okay, well, this is what elite, playing looks like. And then just getting in front of the camera and, doing some practice runs with somebody that knows a little bit more than you do. From the casting perspective, I would say we only have one caster currently who has a background in radio and TV broadcasting. So, went to school for it, knows the voice, the nuances, and whatnot. Everybody else, they just really loved the game, and they would do things on their own. And then eventually we picked them up, brought them in, polished them a little bit more, taught them about the ins and outs. This is what you can't say. You should definitely not say this ever. And then just letting them kind of grow as they stick with us.
For players, there honestly isn't that much that needs to be done as far as like playing in the game itself. Generally, if they're good enough to play at the collegiate level, they know how to learn, they know how to improve themselves. So the biggest areas we try and work on are being part of a team, because for most of them, they're used to the traditional rank ladder, it's just them improving on their own. And so really trying to get it to their heads that you're part of a team now, we practice these times, you need to work within team composition and what the team needs, even if that means you're improving things that you don't think you need to improve, or you're working in areas you don't think you need to work. So really, the largest issue is getting them used to the idea that they are part of a larger organization and a larger team, and sometimes need to adapt what they want to do to fit those needs. As far as the branding goes, I try and keep it relatively simple and mostly just go with the list of don'ts. Both because that's not really, for players, that's not their focus, right? Unless they're going fairly deep into large tournaments, they're not going to get that much media time. They're not really on stream. Like, the streams we do are just gameplay content. We don't do face cams or anything. So there's really not much opportunity for them to interact or represent the university. And because of that, just keeping it simple makes it much easier for them to remember. Like, we don't need to do trainings if you don't do this, you don't do this, you don't say that.
How do you enter the class? You one is baseball, one is the athlete, one is the college money, or you get to you feel
that's always a difficulty. And so as far as participation on the team goes, we try to generally cap the total number of practice, scrim, and competition hours per week to between 15 and 20, to ensure that students have plenty of time to complete their academic work, focus on academic needs. Obviously, we can't really control what they're doing in their off hours. If they want to play their chosen game until 3 in the morning and neglect their academic work, we can't really do that. We can't sit next to them and make sure they don't do that. We do have GPA requirements. They have to maintain at least a 3.0 at all times while they're on the competitive team. So if they do neglect academics, then obviously that removes them from the varsity team. It's definitely a difficult balancing act because we're dealing with students who are newly adults, who are newly free in a lot of ways that they weren't otherwise. And so I think most of it just sort of comes down to giving them the right balance of freedom to make the right choices, as well as restricting the environment to ensure that those are the easy choices to make.
I mean, music is very important, just let's back away from esports for a second. Let's talk about a game, right? The Undertale soundtrack has how many renditions in a traveling orchestra just playing it? Legend of Zelda is timeless. So that already kind of fosters a lot of feels, for lack of a better word, when you're going through this gaming experience. And as esports, the game goes into the esports sphere, you want to carry that with it, so it's equally important. So what does the intro music look like? For, let's say, the Smite and Paladins, for example, for the World Championships, the cue and music and whatnot that we use, we work with Ridgway music to develop that, just to have its own kind of grandiose, it's a World Championship, kind of feel. League of Legends and KDA, that video bangs, it's really cool. So it's very much important in the esports space. Just similar that you would see for any traditional sports competition. When the teams are entering the stadium and all of the things that go along with that, halftime shows. So I don't anticipate that going anywhere. If anything, I think it's just going to keep growing.
Yeah, we definitely strongly incorporate music into our event. I think at our last one we had a student DJ playing for a large portion of the time. It adds in time between competitions. It helps get people motivated and energized while they're watching. It's a huge part of it.
Yeah, 'cause nobody wants to. I mean, you ever been in a restaurant? They cut off the music on you, and you're like, whoa, it's really weird. Like, it's the same thing with like live events, you know, and get like just in game in the production. So.
Any last questions? Cool. Then I think we're done.
Yeah. You did very well.
Thank you guys.